Today, they're the faces millions of us grew up falling for. Yet every single one of these 15 actors waited until their 40s and beyond to finally say, I do. One of them even managed to get married in secret, with fans only finding out when he casually thanked his wife during an awards speech. We're counting down from 15 to 1, and the higher we climb, the longer they made the world wait, all the way to the man who stayed a bachelor for 30 straight years. But first, an actress you'd never guess had to wait this long for love. How does a woman an entire nation calls its first love reach 40 without ever having a public romance of her own? For 2 decades, Sun Ye-jin was exactly that, the face millions grew up adoring. From the tearjerkers, the classic in a moment, to remember to the warm, grown-up romance of Something in the Rain.
야, 왜 냈어? 동생 뺏겨먹었다고 경선이한테 혼나겠다.
앞으로 애들 점심값 책임지면 되지.
알았어.
By the early 2020s, she sat near the very top of the whole industry, one of the most bankable and most decorated leading ladies of her generation. On screen, she'd fallen in love 100 times. Off-screen, she was so fiercely guarded and so visibly content with her career that fans genuinely began to wonder whether she'd ever marry at all. Then came Hyun Bin. The two first crossed paths back in 2014 when they climbed the same stage to accept awards at a film festival. They reunited on the 2018 crime thriller The Negotiation, and then came Crash Landing on You, the 2019 phenomenon whose sweeping cross-border romance made their chemistry impossible to ignore. For nearly 2 years, both agencies denied everything, right up until a February 2022 episode of You Quiz on the Block, when Sun Ye-jin gently, almost shyly, referred to the man in her life as her first love. Days later came the engagement, and on the last day of March, at around 40, she married him in an intimate garden ceremony with only family and close friends. That November, she welcomed a baby boy. And, tellingly, she didn't disappear into private life the way some assumed she would. She'd actually headlined the hit drama 39 while planning the wedding. And in 2025, she returned to the big screen opposite Lee Byung-hun in Park Chan-wook's acclaimed black comedy No Other Choice, one of the biggest Korean films of the year, later chosen as the country's official Oscar submission. The nation's first love had, at long last, found her own, and quietly proved she could have the family and the career both, entirely on her own timeline. But every love story takes two, and the man she married had been guarding his own heart even longer.
내가 당신의 취향에 대해서 잘 모르는 편인가?
내 취향은 리정혁 씨가 제일 잘 알잖아.
당신 취향이 뭔데?
리정혁 씨.
Hyun Bin had loved and lost so publicly once before that he simply stopped letting the world anywhere near it. For nearly 2 decades, he was one of Korea's most swoon-worthy leading men. The mischievous heir of My Lovely Samsoon, the brooding department store prince of Secret Garden, and eventually the North Korean officer who captured the entire world in Crash Landing on You. And for just as long, he was one of the industry's most guarded bachelors. He'd had exactly one openly confirmed relationship with actress Song Hye-kyo, and when it ended back in 2011, announced painfully a single day after he entered the military, he pulled the curtain shut on his private life for good. He served out his enlistment in the Marine Corps, one of the toughest branches there is, and came home even more protective of the little that was still his alone. So it meant something that Sun Ye-jin was the one who finally got through. By his own team's account, he'd been reluctant even to sign on to the negotiation until he heard she was attached. And once the two began playing lovers on Crash Landing on You, the line between the role and the real thing quietly dissolved. For a man who guarded every syllable about his personal life, confirming their relationship in 2021 and then marrying her that following March at around 40 was about as close to a public declaration of love as he had ever come. And here's the part fans still can't get over. The guarded one became the soft one. The actor who once refused to breathe a word about who he was dating now can barely finish an interview without lighting up about his wife and their little boy, born that same November, crediting her, without a second's hesitation, for making his life feel whole. He'd kept the door shut for a full decade. As it turned out, he'd simply been waiting for the one person worth opening it for. Those two fell in love through the work. Our next star found her answer somewhere far less scripted, at somebody else's wedding. Picture the reigning queen of the Korean rom-com, Gong Hyo-jin, standing at Son Ye-jin and Hyun Bin's ceremony, catching the bridal bouquet. And this time, actually believing the old superstition might come true. For the better part of 2 decades, she had all but owned the genre, the prickly chef of pasta, the star-crossed lead of The Greatest Love, the woman who could see the dead in Master's Son, and the fierce, wounded single mother of When the Camellia Blooms, a performance that made her Gallup Korea's Television Actor of the Year.
총각이 뭐 애 딸린 여자 좋다 그러면 다 논한 거예요? 결정적으로 황용식 씨가 제 스타일이 아니에요.
She was so beloved the press coined a nickname just for her, Gong Veli, and off-screen she became a genuine fashion icon. Yet through it all, playing women forever chasing love, her own answer had always seemed to be a cheerful, defiant, not just yet. And then she caught that bouquet. Just months later, she confirmed what fans had begun to suspect. She was dating singer-songwriter Kevin Oh, a Superstar K winner roughly a decade her junior, who had lent his voice to some of the country's most beloved drama soundtracks. The two had quietly met a couple of years earlier and bonded over a shared love of music and art. On the 11th of October, 2022, at 42, they married in a chic, intimate ceremony in New York City. She in a Valentino gown, far from the Korean press, announcing it with nothing more than a photo of their rings and the words, "Just married." A free spirit to the very end, the rom-com queen didn't just star in a love story, she finally got to live one on nobody's terms but her own, keeping her marriage every bit as easygoing and private as her courtship. Gong Hyo-jin found love among friends. Our next star found his in the unlikeliest place of all, on the other side of a microphone. The woman who would one day become So Ji-sub's wife first met him as a broadcaster, there to interview him, not to marry him. For 2 full decades, he'd been the very definition of the unreachable heartthrob, brooding, smoldering, impossibly cool. He shattered hearts across Asia as the dying gangster of I'm Sorry, I Love You, the tormented Cheeble of Cain and Abel, and the haunted loner of Master's Son, and proved himself on the big screen too, from the boxing drama Rough Cut to the tearjerker Be With You.
누군 좋아서 찾으러 온 줄 알아? 기억 없이 마음 편하게 내가 사는 세상에서 네가 사는 세상이랑 엮이지 않고 행복할 수 있었어.
그래요.
He even moonlighted improbably as a rapper. He served his mandatory military duty at the height of his fame, then came back bigger than ever. The rare heartthrob who only seemed to grow more untouchable with age. But his cool, guarded image left fans convinced that a man that private would simply never settle down. And then came the twist that quietly undid everyone. Back in 2018, a poised young announcer named Cho Eun-jung sat across from him to interview him for a broadcast while he promoted a film. The cameras stopped, but the two stayed in touch. And somewhere in the months that followed, all those questions and answers turned into something neither of them had seen coming. In the spring of 2020, at 43, he married her, a woman some 17 years his junior, in a small private ceremony with no fanfare and no drama, and quietly gave a generous donation to charity on his wedding day. Sometimes the person you've been waiting your whole life for was sitting directly across the table, all along. The two have since retreated into a warm, guarded family life of their own, worlds away from the lonely, wounded men, so Ji-sub spent his career playing. So Ji-sub kept his romance quiet until the very end. Our next star kept hers a secret until it was already done. For an entire generation, Choi Ji-woo was the face of beautiful heartbreak, the woman who cried on screen so the rest of Asia could cry along with her. As the luminous, doomed heroine of Winter Sonata and Stairway to Heaven, she didn't just become famous, she became a phenomenon, especially in Japan, where Winter Sonata made her a beloved icon across an entire continent. She went on to command some of the highest per-episode fees any actress in the country had ever earned. When she returned to cable television for 20 again, after 2 decades on the networks, her reported paycheck set a brand new record, and carried, like several of her legendary peers, an almost mythic aura of untouchable singlehood.
내가 시시콜콜 별별 스타를 다 떨었구나. 근데 왜 괜히 따라쟁이를 하는 건데?
모든 데이트 장소는 다 거기서 거기야.
The years passed. The rumors never stuck. And, warmed by her funny, unguarded turns on variety shows, fans made their quiet peace with the idea that she simply belonged to them alone. She had other plans. In 2018, at 43, she stunned the entire industry by marrying a non-celebrity businessman about 9 years younger than her. No drawn-out dating scandal, no public engagement, just a sudden, graceful announcement that it was already done. The following year, the couple welcomed a daughter, and the woman who had spent a career weeping through doomed romances slipped naturally into a warm new chapter of real-life motherhood, still lighting up the occasional screen. She even turned up delightfully as herself in a cameo on the global smash crash landing on You. After a lifetime of playing women unlucky in love, the tragic queen had, at last, written herself a genuinely happy ending. Choi Ji-woo slipped quietly into marriage. Our next actress slipped quietly out of the spotlight altogether. One of the most luminous leading ladies of the 2000s was everywhere. And then, at the height of it all, Kim Jung-eun stepped off the stage and married a man the cameras had never even seen. If you were watching Korean dramas in that era, you knew her. Radiant, magnetic, impossible to look away from. And never more so than as Kang Tae-young, the aspiring filmmaker at the heart of the beloved classic Lovers in Paris. That 2004 series wasn't just a hit, it was a genuine cultural moment, one of the highest-rated dramas of its time, and it swept the year's biggest honors, earning Kim the grand prize at the SBS Drama Awards and Best Actress at the Baeksongs. The show was such a sensation that its lines and its fashion swept the country, and it launched an entire trilogy of hit dramas in its wake. For years, she was among the most bankable leading ladies in the country, and decades later, she'd charm a whole new generation with a scene-stealing turn in strong girl Nam-soon. Proof that the spark that first made her a star had never really dimmed.
그러니까 집에서 애 둘 보는 게 뭐가 힘들다고. 말이 났으니 얘기하자. 내가 몽골에 애 데려가지 말라고 했지? 왜 애를 데려갔어?
But for all that fame, and all those years at the very top, marriage simply never made it onto her schedule. Then, in 2016, at 42, she married a Korean-American businessman in a small, private ceremony held quietly in the United States, choosing, after a life lived under the brightest lights in the country, a partner and a peace entirely outside of them. She stepped back, spent long stretches away from the screen, and never once seemed to regret trading the noise for a quieter kind of joy. Kim Jung-eun took her whole life to choose. Our next star, once she finally knew, barely took a season. Han Go-eun had taken her time about everything her entire life, and then married a man she had known for barely 100 days. She had come up as a fashion model, tall, striking, impossibly elegant, before becoming one of the most glamorous leading women on television, a commanding presence in hits like the gambling epic All In and the sweeping family saga East of Eden.
집값이 내 혈압처럼 올라. 어? 혈압은 약이라도 있지. 집값은 아주.
아이고, 그래 파토리 또 시작한다 또.
For years, she was the very picture of the poised, self-possessed single star, the kind of woman for whom marriage always seemed to live somewhere off in the comfortable distance. A someday, never a soon. She was in no hurry, and she never once pretended to be. Friends and fans alike had all but concluded she was a lifelong bachelorette, too independent and too particular to ever settle. And then, all at once, the timeline collapsed. In the summer of 2015, at 40, she married a non-celebrity, an ordinary company employee, a man entirely outside the industry, after a whirlwind courtship of only about 100 days. When their love story came out, she spoke about it with a warm, almost surprised honesty. When she knew, she simply knew. One season, she was the picture of the unhurried single star. The next, she was somebody's wife. It turns out the people who wait the longest are sometimes the ones who move fastest of all, once the right person finally walks through the door. Han Go-eun didn't hesitate for a single second, and afterward she gradually stepped back from the spotlight to pour herself into the family she'd waited so long to build. Some of these stars fell fast. Our next love story took the long way round, and it plays out like one of his own films. Two stars fall hard for each other. They break up, and they spend 3 long years apart, until a single phone call placed from a movie set halfway around the world brings them back together. That's the real romance of Lee Byung-hun, one of the only Korean actors to genuinely conquer Hollywood. G.I. Joe, Terminator Genesis, The Magnificent Seven, and, more recently, the ice-cold, unforgettable frontman of Squid Game.
얘들아, 그 밥 먹다 말고 뭐 하는 짓이야 이게? 밥 먹을 때 이러는 거 아니야? 여기 어르신들도 많은데 버르장머리 없이 거기다 두 놈이 한 사람을 창피하지도 않아?
His romance with actress Lee Min-jung is pure melodrama, and the reason the two waited so long to marry isn't the one most people assume. They first started dating in 2006, when he was already a colossal star and she was a rising talent, and after a while, they split. For years, the story was that he'd stepped back for her sake. But by Lee Min-jung's own later confession on a variety show, the truth was gentler and more human than that. She was the one who kept postponing. "I kept wanting to work on one more project," she admitted. Lee Byung-hun, she said, eventually told her, simply, patiently, to just decide whether she wanted to marry him or not, and that if she did, he would wait. So he waited. 3 years after the breakup, in 2012, they found their way back to each other. And in August 2013, at 43, they married at the Grand Hyatt in Seoul. They've since become parents to a son and a daughter, and years later, with disarming honesty, Lee Byung-hun admitted it took him a full 5 years of marriage just to learn how to truly listen to his wife. Some couples get their timing right the very first time. Others have to lose each other completely before they understand what they had. They're one of the industry's most enduring couples now, living proof that the long way round can still lead somewhere real. Lee Byung-hun waited years for one woman. Our next star made an entire continent wait, wondering if he'd ever marry at all. Bae Yong-joon was, at one point, the single biggest star in all of Asia. Before any of the others here, there was Yeon-sama. His drama Winter Sonata didn't merely make him famous, it helped ignite the entire Korean wave and turned him into a near-religious figure in Japan, where tens of thousands of fans would mob the airport just to glimpse him, and where he became, for a time, the highest-paid actor in all of Korean television. In Japan, the devotion reached almost unimaginable heights. Fans there affectionately crowned him Yeon-sama, and commentators seriously measured the Yeon-sama effect his popularity had on tourism and trade between the two countries.
체린이 친구? 춘천에서 봤었죠? 재미있는 우연이군요. 이민영입니다. 나 기억 못해요?
Then he did something almost no star at his peak would dare. He stepped away from acting almost entirely, reinventing himself as a shrewd business mogul at the head of a major entertainment company. And through all of it, one question followed him everywhere. When, if ever, would the eternal prince settle down? The answer finally arrived in 2015. Bae Yong-joon to tie the knot at last! The headlines sighed, almost with relief. At around 43, he married actress Park Soo-jin, about 13 years his junior, a former idol-turned-actress who had once been signed to his own agency. On the way to his own wedding, he wrote that he felt nervous and emotional, thanking the fans who had waited alongside him for years. And then, quietly, he and his bride slipped away to Hawaii, raising their 2 children far from the frenzy that once had tens of thousands chanting their father's name. He had built an empire, but this, in the end, was the part he chose to protect. Bae Yong-joon slipped away to a quiet life in paradise. Our next star never went anywhere. She just never seemed to age and never seemed to rush. Fans have joked for years that Jang Na-ra must keep a portrait aging in an attic somewhere, which may be exactly why nobody quite noticed she was in absolutely no hurry to marry. Famous since she was a teenager, a genuine double threat who topped the pop charts and headlined beloved dramas from Successful Story of a Bright Girl to Fated to Love You and VIP.
고객님 평소 입으시던 사이즈로 가져왔는데 아무래도 지금 살쪘다는 건가요? 해당 브랜드가 다른 브랜드에 비해 사이즈가 좀 작게 나온 것 같습니다.
그걸 알면서 이걸 가져온 건 나보고 관리 좀 하라는 거고.
She still looks so improbably youthful that co-stars and fans treat her agelessness as a running national joke. For most of those years, she poured every bit of that seemingly frozen youth straight into her work. And then, on the set of the 2019 drama Fave IP, she noticed something. The same quiet cinematographer kept turning up in the background of the photos she was taking. His name was Jung Ha-chol, 6 years her junior. And in a lovely reversal of the usual script, Jang Na-ra was the one who made the first move. She fell, she later said, for his warm smile, his sincerity, and above all the way he poured his whole heart into his work. After more than 2 years together, the two married in June 2022 at 41 in a private outdoor ceremony in Seoul. And she guarded his privacy so fiercely that she kept his face hidden even in their own wedding photos. She's never been shy, though, about how happy it made her. I think marriage should be fun. She once said, "You get married to enjoy life. So if it's not happy or fun, then what's the point?" And her husband turned out to be far more than a partner at home. It was he who pushed her to take the 2024 legal drama Good Partner, the role that went on to win her the grand prize at that year's SBS Drama Awards. Asked who her own real-life good partner was, she didn't hesitate for a second. It was him. Jang Na-ra made the first move. Our next actor took the slowest, surest road of all. Namgoong Min sat in the director's chair and cast his future wife as his leading lady in a short film, then spent the next 7 years, in a sense, auditioning for a very different role, her husband. For a long time, he was the actor other actors quietly admired, a slow-burning talent who clawed his way up from scene-stealing supporting turns in films like A Dirty Carnival to full-fledged leading man status in beautiful Gong Hyo-jin, the beloved office comedy Good Manager, the baseball drama Hot Stove League, and the sweeping period romance My Dearest, gathering some of the industry's very top grand prizes along the way.
그 여인도 나랑 같은 마음이길 바랬는데 날 연모한 적도 믿은 적도 없다고 하더군.
His had been a famously slow climb, too. Years of small, easily overlooked roles before his talent finally made him a leading man in his late 30s and a multiple grand prize winner soon after. His love story is every bit as patient as that climb. He first met model-turned-actress Ji Na-room back in 2015 on the set of that short film he was directing and she was starring in. They dated for some 7 years. And a full year before they ever walked down the aisle, at a nationally televised awards ceremony, he chose to tell the entire country exactly how he felt, thanking her by name from the stage in front of everyone. "Beautiful, thank you so much for always being with me. I love you." The two finally married in October 2022, at around 44, in an elegant ceremony at Seoul's Hotel Shilla, with none other than the legendary group TVXQ performing for the newlyweds. Slow, deliberate, and utterly, quietly certain. And their story is still being written. In June 2026, nearly 4 years after the wedding, the couple happily announced they were expecting their very first child. Namgoong Min's story is still being written. Our next couple wrote theirs through the hardest chapter imaginable. For 11 years, Shin Min-ah and the man she loved, Kim Woo-bin, were one of Korea's most beloved couples. And through the very hardest of those years, she never once let go of his hand. A star since the early 2000s, the effortlessly luminous lead of My Girlfriend is a Gumiho, Our Blues, and the runaway feel-good hit Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, she and actor Kim Woo-bin went public with their relationship all the way back in 2015.
아이스크림 먹을래? 아, 저기 정전이 돼서 아이스크림 냉장고에 있는 아이스크림이 더 녹을 것 같아서 잠깐만.
And then, in 2017, came the news that would test everything. Kim Woo-bin was diagnosed with nasopharyngeal cancer and stepped away from acting entirely to fight it. Through the treatment, the uncertainty, and the long road back, Shin Min-ah stayed quietly, steadfastly by his side. He recovered. And still, true to one of the industry's most private, drama-free couples, the two were in no hurry at all. It wasn't until December 2025, after a full 11 years together, that they finally married in an intimate ceremony at Seoul's Shilla Hotel, Shin Min-ah at 41. Ahead of the wedding, the couple quietly donated 300 million won to charity. When the news finally broke, fans split into two camps. Some couldn't quite believe it had taken Kim Woo-bin more than a decade to finally propose. But just as many insisted the timing was perfect, that after everything the two had survived together, this was exactly the moment it was always meant to happen. And as for Shin Min-ah marrying at 41, to the fans who'd followed their love story for 11 years, that detail didn't matter in the slightest. When it's the right person, the number on the calendar is the last thing anyone bothers to count. Some people wait for the right person. These two waited, weathered the unthinkable together, and only then made it official. No frenzy, no spectacle, just two people who had already been through everything, quietly promising to keep going. That was a love that weathered the unthinkable. Our next story is one of the two we promised you at the very start, the fearsome tough guy who married in total secret. You know, Ma Dong-seok, Don Lee as the unstoppable wall of muscle who punches his way through Train to Busan, the record-shattering Roundup franchise, and Marvel's Eternals, where he made his Hollywood debut as the warrior Gilgamesh opposite Angelina Jolie.
This is a secret group. Odin taught me as a thank you after he helped me feel off his arm in thunder.
It was, in its way, a kind of homecoming. He'd grown up in the United States, working for years as a personal trainer, reportedly even coaching professional fighters, before sheer muscle and charisma carried him into Korean film. On screen, he is pure, overwhelming force. Off-screen, by every account, he's one of the gentlest, most soft-spoken men in the business. He'd fallen for Ye Jung-hwa, a health trainer and occasional actress from his own agency, some 17 years his junior, and the two confirmed their relationship all the way back in 2016. Then, true to his intensely private nature, he did something almost unheard of for a star of his size. He all but married her in secret, quietly registering their marriage around 2021 at roughly 50, with no ceremony, no press, and no announcement at all. The public only pieced it together when he stood at a podium and thanked "my wife, Ye Jung-hwa, whom I love." The couple finally held a small, intimate wedding in 2022, long after they had already, legally and lovingly, become husband and wife. For a man whose entire image is built on throwing knockout punches, the sheer tenderness of his real life may be the biggest plot twist of all. He rarely speaks about her in interviews, guarding their life together as fiercely as he guards a movie set. But when he does, the fearsome tough guy turns, unmistakably, into a man completely in love. Ma Dong-seok hid a soft heart behind a fearsome face. The next man hid something more tender still. He'd quietly given up on love altogether. You know Ki-joon best as Ju Dan-tae, the gleefully wicked schemer that audiences love to hate across all 3 seasons of the runaway hit The Penthouse.
수건 누구지? 우리 석경인가 아니면 은별인가? 어차피 다 내정되어 있는 거 아니야?
But long before the villains, he was a gifted, classically trained musical theater actor, commanding the stage in grand productions like Mozart and Elizabeth before he ever terrorized The Penthouse. And behind every larger-than-life role was an intensely private man who kept his personal life almost entirely off stage. For years, he had been one of the industry's most confirmed bachelors, the kind of man interviewers had simply stopped asking about marriage. So when his news finally came, it came in the most disarming way imaginable. In his own handwriting, a letter to his fans that stopped people cold. "I never thought I would find someone to spend my life with," he wrote, "but I met someone warm-hearted and considerate, and I intend to start a new life with them through marriage." Read that first line again, because it's the whole story. He never thought he would find anyone. This was a man who had, by his own quiet admission, genuinely made his peace with the possibility that this chapter would simply never come for him. And then, against his own expectations, it did. The couple wed in a private ceremony in December 2024, and that January, he shared a single beaming photo of himself in a white tuxedo. At around 48, long after he'd stopped waiting for love, it found him anyway. Because his was never a story about giving up on love. It was a story about quietly keeping the door open, even when he'd stopped believing anyone would ever walk through it. Ki-joon found love at 48, long after he'd stopped hoping. But the man at the very top of our list waited even longer, 30 years longer. For 3 decades, if you had asked all of Korea to name the one actor who would never, ever marry, they'd have given you the same answer. His. So how did the nation's most confirmed bachelor, Jung Woo-sung, end up a husband at 52 and a father even before that? Impossibly handsome, famously guarded, and, it always seemed, wedded to nothing but his craft and his conscience, he was a bona fide film icon, the brooding heartthrob of the youth classic Beat, the swaggering gunslinger of the good, the bad, the weird, the steely lead of Steel Rain, and, off-screen, a genuinely admired humanitarian who spent years as a goodwill ambassador for the world's refugees.
중정에 엄청난 돈을 상납했습니다. 그리고 그 돈은 황국장 금고로 들어가고 아마 황국장 위로도 전달됐을 겁니다.
Through every phase of that towering career, one thing seemed absolutely certain to an entire nation. This was a man who would simply never settle down. In a quiet twist of fate, he had even, years earlier, played the great love opposite Sun Ye-jin herself in the very film that helped make her a star, A Moment to Remember. And then, in the space of a single year, the symbol shattered, beautifully. In late 2024, news broke that Jung Woo-sung had become a father, welcoming a son with model Moon Gabi. And in August 2025, at 52 years old, he quietly registered his marriage to his longtime, non-celebrity partner. After 3 decades of headlines swearing he would stay single forever, Korea's most confirmed bachelor did it entirely his own way, in his own order, on nobody's timeline but his own. And perhaps that's the quiet lesson underneath this whole countdown, that love doesn't check a calendar. It arrives when it arrives, sometimes at 40, sometimes at 52, and every single person here is living proof that it is never, ever too late to end up exactly where you were always meant to be. 15 stars. 15 wildly different roads to the same place. Some of them waited because the work always came first. One of them waited years for the person who kept saying, just one more project. And at least one had genuinely stopped believing it would ever happen for him, right up until the moment it did. So tell me, whose love story was most worth the wait for you? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to see love that's already gone the distance, click the video on your screen for the K-drama couples who are still together in 2026, proof that in this industry, some love stories really do last.